In a quiet and forgotten corner of Africa, there was a village named Loko, resting peacefully near the deep waters of Lake Mbuzi. The people of this village lived close to nature, following ancient traditions passed down through whispers and ritual. Elders spoke of spirits in the wind, power in the rivers, and magic hidden beneath the soil. It was a place where silence spoke louder than words, and even the trees seemed to listen. Among the villagers lived a girl named Zubeka, gentle, quiet, and different. Zubeka had lost her mother when she was just a child. Since then, her world had changed. Her stepmother, Naledi, took control of the home. Naledi was strict and cold, treating Zubeka like a stranger instead of a daughter. Every day, Zubeka woke before the sun, fetched water, cleaned the compound, and stayed out of the way. She never complained, never asked for more. She had learned to carry her pain quietly, like a hidden pouch tucked beneath her clothes. But there was something special about Zubeka that even she didn't fully understand. While others laughed and shouted, Zubeka sat by the lake, her feet in the water, whispering to the wind. She talked to birds, touched the leaves as if they could feel her love, and listened to the earth like it had secrets only she could hear. People thought she was just strange or slow, but the truth was, Zubeka felt things more deeply than others. The trees comforted her, the stars gave her peace, and in her silence, a quiet strength was growing. Though she wore simple clothes and kept her head down, her presence was calming. Children liked sitting near her, animals followed her without fear, and sometimes, old women in the village would pause when passing her, sensing something ancient in her eyes. Zubeka was not loud or proud. She was not seen as powerful, but she was connected to something the others had forgotten. The old ways, the forgotten wisdom, the silent force of nature. Naledi never liked Zubeka. She saw her as weak, useless, and in the way. Her own daughter, Mbaleni, was her pride, loud, pretty, and always shining in public. But Zubeka, she was the shadow in the corner, the quiet girl with the strange gaze. Naledi kept her busy with chores, never letting her rest or dream. Yet, even with the weight of sorrow on her shoulders, Zubeka remained kind. She still helped her stepmother. She still smiled at the village. Naledi was not like most women in the village. She didn't care for small joys or quiet moments. She only cared about rising higher, gaining power, and controlling whatever she could. Her ambition was sharp, like a knife hidden beneath a smile. She had a daughter named Mbaleni, who was the mirror of her mother, proud, spoiled, and always dressed in the finest cloth. Mbaleni believed she deserved only the best, and so did Naledi. For years, Naledi had been grooming her to marry into power, and when Chief Malawo expressed interest, she saw their future as sealed. Chief Malawo was not a kind man. He was much older, wealthy, and feared more than loved. But in Naledi's eyes, he was the key to everything she had ever wanted. Mbaleni was thrilled. She walked around like the wedding had already happened, telling everyone she would soon become the most powerful woman in the village. Naledi visited Malawo often, flattering him, offering gifts, reminding him of her daughter's beauty and sharp mind. Everything was going according to plan. But then something unexpected happened. Chief Malawo came to visit, and instead of Mbaleni, his eyes fell on Zubeka. She wasn't dressed up. She wasn't loud or trying to impress him. She sat by the fire, quietly grinding herbs with her bare hands. Her eyes stayed low, her face calm, and something about that silence, that obedience, caught Malawo's attention. He didn't want a wife who would argue, demand, or shine too brightly. He wanted someone soft, someone he could control. And Zubeka looked like exactly that. When Naledi heard Malawo had changed his mind and now wanted Zubeka instead, her fury was like wildfire. But she didn't show it. She didn't scream or protest. Instead, she smiled and began spinning a new story, one where Zubeka's marriage to the chief would be a sacrifice for the good of the family. She told the village that Zubeka was chosen by the ancestors. She told Zubeka that this was her duty, her chance to save her family's name. But it was all a lie. Naledi didn't care about Zubeka's happiness or future. She only saw another way to gain favor with the chief. If Mbaleni couldn't marry him, then at least Naledi could still sit close to power by using Zubeka as the puppet bride. Zubeka, shocked and heartbroken, had no voice in the matter. No one asked what she wanted. No one protected her. She was simply told what to do, dressed in red and gold, and sent to a man who did not love her. The village watched as Zubeka walked beside Malawo, head bowed, steps slow, heart heavy. Some pitied her, some envied her, but no one understood the storm quietly building inside her. Naledi believed she had won again, that she had bent fate to her will, but what she didn't know was that the girl she forced into silence would soon become the voice the entire village would hear, and that the sacrifice she thought she made for power would be the one that brought her downfall. The day Zubeka was married, the village was quiet. There was no music, no singing, women dancing in circles, no children running with flower petals, only the sound of dry wind and heavy footsteps. Her face was covered, but her eyes were empty. People whispered as she walked past, some in confusion, others in pity. Everyone knew this wasn't a wedding of love. It was a transaction, a silent deal made between power and ambition. Zubeka wasn't becoming a wife. She was being given away, like a gift no one wanted to keep. When she arrived at Chief Malawo's compound, she was not welcomed like a new bride. There was no feast, no warm embrace. Malawo simply looked at her, nodded once, and walked away. Her room was small, cold, and far from his. There was no bed of comfort, no golden cloths, no smile waiting to meet her, just walls and silence. Her days quickly turned into a cycle of chores and orders. She cooked meals but never sat at the table. She washed clothes but had none of her own. She served water but was rarely offered a cup. Mbaleni, her stepsister, still lived in the same home, walking around like the true queen. She wore the finest clothes, laughed loudly, and sat beside Malawo during meetings. Everyone knew she was the favorite. She wasn't his wife by title, but she had his heart, his attention, and all the comfort that came with it. Zubeka, on the other hand, was invisible. She moved like smoke, present, but never truly seen. Malawo never spoke to her unless giving a command. He never looked at her with kindness. Sometimes days passed without a word from him. She would sit outside under the moonlight, her hands resting on her knees, eyes staring into the darkness, wondering how her life had turned into this. She remembered the dreams she once had of growing a herb garden, of helping the village with healing, of finding love like the stories her mother used to tell. But now, her days were full of emptiness. Her nights were full of silence. No one came to visit her. The villagers didn't ask how she was. Her stepmother never sent word. She was alone, living in a house filled with people, but not a single soul who cared. The laughter she heard wasn't hers. The joy in the air never reached her chest. She wasn't a wife. She wasn't even a servant. She was just there. Every time she passed by Mbaleni, she felt the sharp sting of comparison. Mbaleni wore jewels. Zubeka wore bruises of silence. Mbaleni sat with pride. Zubeka stood in corners. And yet, Zubeka never shouted, never cried in front of them. She held her pain like a secret treasure buried deep inside. But deep in that silence, something was waking up, something old, something powerful, a part of her that refused to be forgotten, because even the quietest seed, buried under the darkest soil, still dreams of the sun. And while they all thought she was weak, broken, and lost, they had no idea the storm she was becoming. Many nights passed in silence for Zubeka, filled with loneliness, sadness, and deep questions. Why had life turned out this way? Why was she made to suffer in a house where no one saw her pain? One night, when the moon hung low and the wind carried a strange stillness, Zubeka fell into a deep, heavy sleep. But this was not an ordinary sleep. It was a calling. In her dream, she saw her mother standing beneath a tree glowing with golden leaves. Her voice was soft but strong, and her eyes full of both sorrow and strength. She said, "Your tears will grow a tree that breaks chains." Then she disappeared into the light. Zubeka woke up with her heart racing. The dream felt more real than the world she had woken into. Her mother's words stayed with her all day, echoing through her chores and through every quiet moment she had to herself. That night, she sat under the stars and remembered something she had long buried, her grandmother's voice, her hands digging into the earth near an old mango tree behind their former home. As a child, Zubeka had once helped her gather herbs, roots, and plants that had power, healing power. Her grandmother had whispered, "One day, this knowledge will save more than just you." The next morning, Zubeka quietly returned to the mango tree. It had grown wild and tall, forgotten by others, but not by her heart. She dug softly at its roots and found small cloth bundles hidden deep in the soil. Inside were dried herbs, tightly wrapped and still smelling of the earth. Her hands trembled as she touched them. It felt like her mother and grandmother were guiding her, showing her the path that had always been hers to walk. She didn't tell anyone. She knew this had to remain secret. Each night, she used the herbs in tiny amounts, mixing them with oils, boiling them into teas, and gently rubbing them onto her skin. Slowly, her tired body began to regain strength. The dark circles under her eyes faded. The sadness in her chest grew lighter, and the dreams returned, not of pain, but of power. Not long after, a child in the village fell sick. The mother, desperate and afraid, passed by Zubeka while she was collecting water. Without thinking, and with a soft voice, Zubeka offered a small pouch of crushed leaves. "Boil this, just 3 drops," she said. The mother hesitated, then took it. The next day, the child was better. Word spread slowly at first. Another child came with a fever, then an old man with a swollen leg. Zubeka helped quietly, in secret, always asking for nothing in return. More and more people began to whisper her name, not in pity, but in curiosity. "Zubeka, she healed my daughter. Zubeka, her hands are blessed." But she never bragged. She never stood tall. She stayed in the background, quietly becoming something stronger than anyone expected. Her spiritual power was awakening, not with fire or thunder, but with patience, love, and memory. And so, while Malawi and Mbaleni still mocked her, still ignored her, Zubeka was quietly becoming the heartbeat of the village, not as a wife, not as a servant, but as something older and deeper, a healer, a spirit walker, a storm rising from still waters. The tree inside her had started to grow, and with every tear she had cried, its roots pushed further into the earth. The whispers began gently, like a breeze through tall grass. "Zubeka healed my child," one mother said in a hushed tone near the well. Another woman nodded. "She gave my father herbs, and now he walks without pain." In a village where news travelled faster than footsteps, these quiet whispers turned into a silent wave. People who once ignored Zubeka now watched her with new eyes. They didn't say it loudly, not yet, but something was changing. Zubeka never asked for attention. She still woke early, finished her chores, and kept her head low in Malawi's house. Mbaleni still sneered, and Naledi never once visited or spoke of her. But outside that cold home, another world was forming. Villagers began visiting her late in the day, when the sun had dipped and the streets were quiet. They came with sore backs, sick babies, strange dreams, and silent worries. And Zubeka, with her gentle voice and calm hands, welcomed them all. She would sit with them under the tree behind the house, near the spot where her grandmother's herbs had once been hidden. There, she listened. She mixed crushed leaves with honey, soaked feet in warm herbal water, or simply gave them a charm made of bark and string. She never turned anyone away. Sometimes, all she gave was her time, her peaceful presence, and that alone seemed to help. Her home, once silent and cold, began to feel alive. The floor was still dirt, and the roof still leaked when it rained, but it had something more powerful than gold: hope. People started calling it a safe place, a place where pain was seen and hearts could speak. Even the children started coming, not just for help, but to sit by Zubeka, to hear her hum old lullabies, or to help her collect wildflowers and herbs. Zubeka didn't realize it at first, but she was slowly becoming important, not through force or loudness, but through love and healing. Her spirit, once buried under sorrow, was now shining like sunlight through leaves. The villagers didn't care that she was Malawi's unwanted wife or Naledi's forgotten stepchild. To them, she was something else now, a helper, a healer, a woman touched by the ancestors. She was still quiet, still humble, but the air around her had changed. Where people once looked past her, they now looked to her. And though she never asked for thanks, people left fruit at her doorstep. They swept her compound when she was busy. Some began whispering, "Zubeka is protected." Others said, "She was chosen." What had started as survival was now becoming purpose. Zubeka's healing had become more than herbs and roots. It was strength, born from pain, wrapped in grace. The very people who once pitied her now admired her in silence. And even though Malawi and Mbaleni tried to pretend nothing had changed, they couldn't stop what was growing, because Zubeka, without even knowing it, was rising, not as a queen dressed in jewels, but as a spirit lifted by the people, one healed heart at a time. It started with a small rash on Mbelene's neck, barely noticeable, but within days it spread like fire. Her smooth skin turned rough and red, and her once perfect hair began falling in strands. Her energy faded. She grew tired easily, lost weight, and her laughter, which once echoed through the compound, turned into angry complaints and whispered fears. She refused to eat food unless she saw it prepared. She avoided mirrors and stayed inside, even when the sun called for her like it used to. Whispers began to rise in the village. "What's happening to Mbelene?" some asked. "Is it sickness or something else?" Others glanced in Zubeka's direction, unsure whether to trust the quiet healer or fear her. Mbelene herself was convinced. She stormed through the village one morning, wild-eyed and shaking. "She did this to me," she cried, pointing at Zubeka with trembling hands. "She cursed me. She wants me gone." Zubeka stood still, her eyes wide but calm. She said nothing. She didn't defend herself. The crowd stood in silence, unsure who to believe. They had seen Zubeka heal their children, their parents, their neighbors. Could she also bring harm? Was she using her powers to punish the ones who wronged her? Malawo, already tired and embarrassed by Mbelene's condition, grew angrier. His pride couldn't handle the gossip. One morning, in front of the whole village, he shouted at Zubeka. "Witch!" he called her. "You hide behind herbs and smiles, but I see you now." He pushed her to the ground and warned everyone to stay away from her. His voice was loud, but his words shook with fear. Fear of losing control, fear of the unknown. But the village was not united in anger. An old woman stepped forward, placing herself between Zubeka and Malawo. "She healed my grandson," she said. Another added, "She brings peace, not poison." A few others helped Zubeka to her feet. There were still those who believed in her, who saw the truth in her silence. The village became divided. Some kept their distance, unsure and frightened. Others came at night, bringing gifts or asking for help. Zubeka did not stop healing. She did not seek revenge. She stayed calm, quiet and grounded, just like the earth she trusted. Even as storms of doubt swirled around her, she stood still, her power growing not from fear, but from love. And deep down, Mbelene knew the sickness she carried might not come from Zubeka's hands, but from her own cruel heart. The village had gathered under the great baobab tree, as they did for important announcements and ceremonies. The air was tense. People sat close, whispering about Zubeka, about Mbelene's strange illness, and about the strange energy that seemed to hang over the village. Just as the headman was about to speak, a voice rose from the crowd, strong, clear, and aged with wisdom. It was Mama Temwe, the oldest woman in the village. Her eyes were cloudy, but her voice was firm. The crowd went silent. She walked slowly to the center, holding a walking stick carved with old symbols. She raised her hand. "I have kept quiet for too long," she said, "but the spirits will not let me sleep. What you call a curse on Mbelene is not from Zubeka. It is the past returning to balance itself." People leaned in, holding their breath. Mama Temwe looked directly at Naledi, who was trying to hide behind the crowd. "You, Naledi, once played with fire. You cast a love charm on Zubeka's father when he was already a married man. You broke a sacred bond. You stole him from his true wife, Zubeka's mother. And when the charm faded, your hatred took over. Her heart could not take it, and she died from the pain you caused." Gasps filled the air. Naledi's eyes widened. She tried to deny it, but Mama Temwe continued. "You thought the ancestors would forget, but nothing done in darkness stays hidden forever. The curse is not on Zubeka. It is on the house built on lies. Mbelene suffers not because of Zubeka's herbs, but because of your sins, Naledi. This is not witchcraft. This is karma." Murmurs turned into loud voices. People looked at Zubeka differently, not with fear, but with sorrow and respect. The truth had broken the illusion. Even Malawo looked stunned, the anger in his face turning to shame. Naledi tried to speak, but her words were weak now, swallowed by the weight of the truth. Zubeka said nothing. She stood quietly, her eyes full of tears, but not from sadness, from release. She had lived under shadows and silence, blamed for things she never did. But now, the truth had been spoken, not by her, but by the spirits through Mama Temwe. And in that moment, the village finally saw her, not as a cursed girl, not as a servant, but as a survivor, a healer, and the rightful daughter of the woman they all forgot. That night, the sky over Lake Mbuzi turned an angry grey. Clouds rolled in like waves, thick and heavy, carrying a storm that no one had seen in years. The air felt different, too quiet, too still. Even the animals had gone silent, hiding as if they sensed what was coming. The villagers whispered among themselves, watching the sky and clutching their children close. Something powerful was in the air, something beyond rain and thunder. As the first drop fell, it was like the heavens opened in warning. Then came the thunder, deep and rumbling, shaking the earth beneath their feet. Lightning cracked across the sky in sharp, jagged lines. The storm moved fast and fierce, sweeping across the village like a spirit set free. People ran indoors, bolting their doors and windows, but their eyes stayed fixed on one place, Naledi's hut. In a flash brighter than the sun, a bolt of lightning tore from the sky and struck Naledi's home. Flames erupted instantly, twisting and rising into the air, lighting the storm-dark village in an eerie orange glow. Screams echoed, but no one could reach her. The fire was too strong, the wind too wild. Inside, Naledi's cries were heard once, then silence. The hut collapsed in on itself, swallowed by fire and smoke. Mbaleni, already weak and haunted by her illness, saw it all, her face twisted with fear. She screamed Zubeka's name, not in anger, but in terror, as if begging for protection or mercy. Then she ran, barefoot and wild, into the forest beyond the village. Some say they heard her sobbing. Others say she vanished into the trees like a ghost, never to be seen again. The next morning, the elders of the village gathered. The storm had calmed, but its message was clear. It wasn't just nature, it was justice. The same spirits that had been ignored for years had finally spoken. Malawo, who once stood proud as a chief, was brought before the council. The elders spoke with heavy hearts but firm voices. "You failed your people," they said. "You mocked the ancestors. You dishonored women. You allowed lies to rule your home." Malawo was stripped of his title, his beads of power removed. He was banished from the village, told never to return. No one wept for him. He left quietly, his eyes low, knowing the spirits had turned away from him. And through it all, Zubeka stayed silent. She stood in the distance, watching the ashes of the hut rise into the sky. She had not raised a hand. She had not spoken curses. But truth, once revealed, had its own power. The storm was not her revenge. It was justice long delayed. And the earth, the sky, and the ancestors had all finally answered. After the storm passed, the village felt new, cleansed, but quiet. The air was still heavy with what had happened, and yet there was a calmness that hadn't been there before. The ashes of Naledi's hut lay cold. The echoes of Mbaleni's screams long faded into the forest. Malawa was gone, stripped of his power, exiled by the very people he once ruled. But Zubeka? She remained. She did not dance in victory. She did not smile at the downfall of those who hurt her. Instead, she rose with the sun the next morning, as she always had. She walked quietly to the stream to fetch water, her steps steady, her eyes soft. There was no pride in her movements, only peace. She was not interested in revenge, only healing. The villagers watched her, not from a distance anymore, but with quiet admiration. The same people who once turned away from her now came forward, not with fear, but with offerings, baskets of fruit, clay pots of water, hand-woven mats. They laid them at her feet, one by one. Children ran to her, hugging her legs. Old men bowed their heads. Women cried and whispered, "Forgive us, we didn't know. We see you now." They gave her names, not the ones given in mockery or pity, but ones of deep honor. "Storm Daughter," they called her, for she had stood through the winds and fire without breaking. "Healer of the valley," for her hands had touched the sick and made them whole. "Mother of Mercy," for she had shown love to a people who had once shown her nothing but pain. Zubeka didn't need a crown or throne. Her power came from her heart, her patience, her ability to forgive even when no one asked for it. She returned to the land where her mother once lived, to the spot where her grandmother used to gather herb. The old hut, half broken and covered in vines, still stood there, silent, waiting. She rebuilt it with her own hands, helped by villagers who offered their time and tools. They shaped the walls with clay and branches, painted them with natural dyes, and built a strong roof from banana leaves and straw. Inside, Zubeka laid woven mats, herbal shelves, and a fire pit for brewing medicine. This was no longer just a hut, it was a healing home. Day by day, people came, not just from her village, but from far away. Mothers with babies, elders with aching bones, even young women searching for guidance. Zubeka welcomed them all. She healed not just wounds, but spirits. Her voice became known for its calm, her eyes for their kindness, her presence for its peace. And through all of this, Zubeka stood alone, but not lonely. The love she gave to others came back to her in waves. She had lost so much, yet she had gained something rare: respect, trust, and a name that would never be forgotten. Not in stories, not in hearts, not in the wind that still whispered through the valley, carrying the legend of the girl who healed, who endured, who rose. If Zubeka's story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video. Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. Share this powerful and inspiring story with your friends so more people can feel the strength and truth behind it. And yes, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more emotional and unforgettable stories. Thank you for your time and support.